Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the Election Watch TV series, an initiative by the Alliance for Community Action, ACA. Now, political parties and candidates require money to publicize their electoral activities and pursue effective campaigns. However, uncontrolled political fundraising and spending can undermine the integrity of the democratic processes and erode the confidence of the electorate in the public institutions. Campaign financing revolve around the protection of expression and prevention of corruption, two of the democratic principles that enter into conflict with one another. Financial participation in a campaign is a form of freedom of expression, and participation must be protected. However, limits and regulations can justifiably be placed to prevent corruption. Should we know the sources of political campaign financing? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. I'm Patrick Soko, and my guest on the program today is the Transparency International Zambia Executive Director, Mr. MAURICE NYAMBE. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for having me.
Now, a quick review on the latest finding by TIZ on how much political parties have spent on billboards and advertising. To begin, share with us a summary of what your research into campaign funding is all about.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And I think maybe before we begin, I think it's only appropriate that we commemorate as well, the passing on of our first Republican president.
Interesting.
So, I mean, of course, we know that Dr. Kenneth Kaunda was an icon, both in Zambia, but also across the African continent. I think there are three specific elements that stand out when you talk about Dr. Kaunda. The first is that, the important role that he played in the liberation movement, both in Zambia, but also across Southern Africa. The second, of course, is the fact that, he willingly gave up power after he lost elections in 1991. And then the third, of course, is just the fact that he's been able to keep Zambia together for all these years, following the One Zambia, One Nation motto. So we would like to really pay our respects as well, even as TIZ, to the family of Dr. Kaunda, and to just pray that God is going to see them through this very difficult moment. Okay, so having said that, thank you so much for that very, very important question. You did touch on, the small research that we did in terms of the billboard advertising and how much that costs. Mm-hmm. Now, that is some very rudimentary research that we did, using proxy indicators, basically to try and ascertain how much political parties are spending to sell themselves to the electorate. And so we looked at different aspects of the different campaign activities that are taking place, focusing primarily on billboards, but as well as media advertisements, so radio, TV, and newspaper adverts, things like campaign songs, and all the rest of it. The idea really is twofold. The first is that we want to give citizens a rough estimate of how much political parties are spending to try and convince them to vote for them or to try and seek votes from them. So that is one. But the second aspect also is that this information or this bit of research that we are doing, we are hoping that it will inform our ongoing advocacy interventions around the broader issue of political party financing. So currently we have a project that is running with the general support of the National Democratic Institute, where we are trying to work with political parties to enhance aspects of political integrity within political parties and within our political processes. So we are hoping that through this small research that we did, which is still growing in terms of covering other aspects, it will help us to, to enhance our advocacy around the issue of political party financing.
Should citizens question the sources of funding for political parties?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is important for citizens to question the source of funding for political parties for a number of reasons. But I think the most important is that, depending on who is funding a particular political party, I think citizens can be able to make judgments, can use that as a proxy indication of, the sort of principles and ideologies that they stand for. Because obviously for you to receive funding from a particular source, it means you subscribe to the principles, ideologies, and virtues of that particular source. And so it's important for that purpose. But also just to enhance the aspect of transparency in terms of the life of political parties, I think it bodes well and portrays a really good picture if political parties are open enough to actually disclose even the source of their funding, allowing citizens to be able to make judgments in that respect.
But what does the law say about political party disclosure of sources of funding in general and not just for campaigns?
Yes, indeed. The law does say quite a lot when it comes to that particular aspect. I mean, we can begin with the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of Zambia, as amended in 2016. So Part 5 of the amended Constitution, and Article 60 in particular, focuses actually on this particular aspect. And allow me, with your indulgence, just to read exactly what it says. So basically, if you look at Article 60, Clause 4, basically it says that the following will be prescribed with regard to political parties. So 5 elements that are given. The first is that there will be an establishment and management of a political parties fund to provide financial support to political parties that have seats in the National Assembly. The second aspect that is going to be prescribed is the accounts of political parties which are funded under the political parties fund, as well as the submission of audited accounts by these political parties. The other element is the sources of funds of political parties, okay? And then the other element is the maximum amount of money to be used for campaigns during elections. So this is in the Constitution as amended in 2016, so it does provide for that. Now, wherever you see the word prescription, where the Constitution says this will be prescribed, basically what that entails is that there's going to be a secondary piece of legislation or a subsidiary piece of legislation that is going to give effect to that particular provision in the Constitution. And in our context, this subsidiary piece of legislation is what is called the Political Parties Bill. Okay. Now, this piece of legislation has not been enacted yet. It is still a bill. So basically, if you look at the Political Parties Bill, again, it makes provision in terms of talking about the funding of political parties. So some of the key provisions that it has, for example, is that it mandates political parties to make declarations to the registrar of political parties within 3 months of their registration, stating the source of funds as well as the assets of that political party. And then it also mandates political parties to provide records of estimated expenditure of that particular party in accordance with the laws of public finance management. And then the last is that it actually mandates political parties to provide audited books of accounts. And so basically what that entails is that in terms of legal provision, it looks like the Constitution has made provision for that, but then the specifics of giving effect to those specific provisions have not yet been finalized because the Political Parties Bill is not yet enacted. Now, for us, it's a good thing that it has not yet been enacted because, as we are going to see later, we think that there are still a lot of wrong things with regard to that bill. But I guess that's something that we'll get to later on in the show.
Interesting, but just because we have said something about the same bill, there was one of the clauses that people raised concern over, suggesting that political parties should be financed by the central government. But looking at Zambia being a small economy, was that attainable? And do you think that was a progressive clause in that same bill?
Well, there are a lot of arguments for and against that particular provision, but I think, that particular provision being in the Constitution and even in the Political Parties Bill is not something that came from without. I think it is a result of the different, deliberations that have been made in different respects, and so yes, personally, I think that is something that is attainable. It definitely is attainable. I mean, it's not a blanket funding that is going to be given to every political party. I think the specific is that it has to be political parties that have representation in the National Assembly. So that is one element. But I think for me, and this is something that maybe we're going to touch on later on, I think that political stakeholders and political parties in particular really should take interest in the Political Parties Bill, because I think this tendency to just focus on the fact that they are going to be funded, it is causing them to lose sight of the bigger picture. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of clauses within the Political Parties Bill that to us are very inimical to the democratic aspirations of this country. And so political parties really should not focus just on the aspect of being financed, but they should look at the bill in its broad sense. It has some provisions which really are a threat even to our democracy as a country, and I think that is what political parties should focus on.
Interesting. Well, our dear viewers, in case you're just joining us, you are watching the Elections Watch TV series that is powered by the Alliance for Community Action. Now, our topic of discussion is financing of political campaigns. My guest on the program is coming from the Transparency International Zambia, TIZ, the Executive Director, Mr. MAURICE NYAMBE. Now, going on with the program, Mr. NYAMBE, I want to also find out, does the Electoral Code of Conduct say anything about political party disclosure of sources of funding that citizens should know?
Actually, the Electoral Code of Conduct does not say anything about political parties disclosing their sources of funding. I mean, it just focuses on the conduct of the elections and how different political players, as well as other stakeholders such as the media and others, should behave themselves or should conduct themselves within the context of an electoral process. So it does not say anything about. I mean, it doesn't mandate political parties to disclose the source of their campaign funding. I suppose the reason for that is because it has been provided for in other proposed pieces of legislation, which is the political parties bill. But the Code of Conduct itself does not say anything about political parties disclosing their source of funding.
What must political parties have to report regularly on their finances? Must political parties have to report regularly on their finances? Do they need to do that?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think for us it's really just touching on what we have spoken about earlier on. The fact that in order for you to be able to enhance aspects of transparency, aspects of accountability, aspects of credibility, even for particular political parties, I think it will be important, for political parties to be able to open themselves up to that extent and to enable citizens to actually make judgments on that basis. But also, especially if the proposed political parties fund becomes law, what that will entail is that this will be taxpayers' money, basically, that will be used to fund political parties. And because you're talking about taxpayers' money, you're talking about public money. And so obviously, political parties need to account for how, they are going to use that public money. But beyond that, I think that, like I said earlier on, just to enhance the aspect of even trust, building trust between political parties and the electorate or the potential electorate, I think it will be important for political parties to open themselves up to that extent, even to the extent of being able to disclose their sources of funding, because it will help to build that trust between them as well as the public. And I think it will help even generally to enhance the integrity of our electoral process. I think one of the things that that would do, like I said earlier, is that depending on who is funding you, citizens will be able to actually make judgments as to what sort of values you believe in, what sort of ideology you actually stand for. And so that can be a proxy indication of those specific elements. So I think it is important that political parties make it a habit really to be able to disclose not just the sources of their funding, but to be able to open themselves up in terms of disclosing many different aspects of their operations. I think that would be
Should
good.
that include the identity of the actual donor?
Well, I don't see the reason why that shouldn't be the case. Because, I mean, one of the things that the lack of disclosure actually does is that it builds a lot of suspicion. If you look at the case of the former ministers, the case of the former ministers who stayed on in office illegally, and the Constitutional Court, of course, ruled that they should pay back. I think for a very long time, it wasn't very clear whether these people had actually paid back. And after a lot of advocacy by civil society organizations and other stakeholders, I think the Patriotic Front made a statement to the effect that some friends of the party had actually paid those monies for them. Now, if you look back and see, the sort of acrimony that was created by that, and the sort of speculation and the sort of debate that was created by that, it shows you the extent to which it's important for political parties to be very open even about their sources of funding. Because already we are asking, back then we were asking to say, okay, who's this Father Christmas who paid those monies on behalf of the former ministers?
Yeah, exactly.
But more so than that, what was in it for him or her or whoever? what do they want to get in return? And so it's these questions that begin to be raised when you don't have such openness in terms of even the sources of your funding as political parties. And so yes, it will actually enhance the political process, or the integrity of the political process, but also it will build trust with the citizens if political parties even go to the extent of disclosing the sources of their funds, even mentioning the donors by name. I mean, we do it ourselves as civil society. For example, if you go on our website today, there will be a space where we actually disclose who is funding our programs. And so, I mean, if we can do it as civil society, what should stop political parties from being able to do it as well? I think it enhances the integrity of the electoral process in general.
Before I get to my next question, I would rather we stick there a little bit. But what, in terms of the fight against corruption, what image did that create, especially the aspect of where the person who paid for the ministers who stayed in office illegally was not revealed, and they just told us to say we have paid for everyone, and the government itself couldn't even review the receipt. And others, in terms of accountability and transparency issues, does that add up towards Zambia creating a good image in the fight against corruption?
No, of course it doesn't. I mean, because obviously, I mean, it really throws the whole aspect of accountability and transparency out of the window. Because if it is a donor that was kind enough to be able to to make those payments on behalf of the minister, what was the big deal about disclosing who this donor is? If this is a legitimate donor, if this is someone who really has come through for them in that sense, then what was the big issue about the source of that money being revealed? I mean, to this day, the truth is we really don't even know whether that money really was paid, to tell you the truth, because of the secrecy that surrounded the whole element. And you will recall, Patrick, that that information only came out because of the pressure that was exerted actually by civil society organizations and other stakeholders to say, ministers, you need to pay back this money based on the ruling of the Constitutional Court. So the whole secrecy around the source of that money and who this donor was, of course, doesn't bode well even for aspects of the anti-corruption fight, because, like I said, we do not know what that donor demanded in return for paying those monies on behalf of the ministers. So it really makes a mockery, if you want, of the fight against corruption, and I don't think that is something that we should ever allow to happen again, even as a country.
Well, our dear viewers, our topic of discussion is financing for political campaigns. My guest on the program is Transparency International Zambia Executive Director, Mr. Maurice NYAMBE. Now, we'll just take a short break, but we'll be back shortly with another interesting issues on the program. Stay tuned.
Camnet TV is here to entertain, educate, and inform you. Catch Rise and Thrive at 07:30 hours every Saturday. Fresh and new praise and worship comes Monday to Friday at 8 hours. Kids need to be glued to the TV every weekday at 09 hours for their favorite cartoons. Off the pitch with the boys as they talk about sport on Saturdays at 09:30 hours.
Remember, we are also here to entertain you with our different varieties of movies every weekday at 10 hours. Join Pastor Victoria and Moses Chuluwa with Healing Word Ministries International Church live sermon every Sunday at 10 hours.
Katamanda brings to you another journey of gospel ministers on Saturdays at 10:30 hours. The verdict comes to your screens at 17:45 hours. Join the Revival Harvest Church every Sunday at 18:30 hours.
Every Monday to Saturday, join us on the news desk at 12 hours as we bring to you the midday news, and at 19:30 hours Central African time every day for the main bulletin.
The ministry with Pastor Moses Chuluwa comes every Friday at 20:45 hours. On Mondays, it's your favorite national matters at 20:45 hours.
Wednesday and Thursday, Pastor Victoria and Moses Chuluwa are on Partnership of Greatness with different spiritual teachings at 20:45 hours.
And Frank on Camnet comes to your screen every Tuesday at 20:45 hours.
Camnet TV, not just another channel.
welcome back. We thank you for staying with us. Now, we proceed with our discussion, Mr. NYAMBE. Does a political party financing necessarily translate into elected politicians being captured by the benefactors?
That's an interesting question, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily result into that. But what it does do is that it makes it more likely, okay, that the said political party will be captured by their donor. So it increases the likelihood of it happening, which will also potentially result in policy as well as state capture. So the reason why it must be, regulated in a sense is really to reduce quite significantly the risk of such policy or state capture happening. So of course you cannot insulate it 100% from happening, but I think what you can do is that you can actually reduce the risk of it happening, and for us that is what this is all about. The fact that you reduce the potential risk of this political party being captured when it gets into government, and therefore, whatever policy provisions are made responding more to the interests of the benefactor rather than, the interests of the citizens. So it's about reducing the risk of that happening. Interesting.
And now getting back to when we started our discussion, we talked about your analysis, your report on billboards and advertising. What are some of the specifics in terms of the money that is going into these campaigns?
Well, I mean, in terms of the aspect of the billboards themselves, and maybe let me just clarify that, that is some research that is actually still going on. As you will recall from our statement, the information that we released really was just for Lusaka. And I think it just covered 4 political parties. And of course, in terms of how we did the research, of course, we really just approached all these different advertising agencies who own these billboards, and we got, a price list basically to say, okay, how much does it cost to do this billboard at Manda Hill or wherever it is that we saw them. And we got that information, and we were able to literally just count how many billboards there are, and then be able to estimate based on the price list that we got. Now, I know that, maybe political parties have gone into some arrangements where they get discounts or things of that nature. But I think for us, the point in doing that research was really just to give a sense of the scale of, or the extent to which political parties go in terms of spending money, even on different campaign activities such as billboards. So that is some research that will still continue, and it will, like I said earlier, it will touch on other, aspects of campaign activities that are taking place. So things like adverts, for example, and all the rest of it. We had, of course, made plans to also cost political rallies, of course, in terms of even all the different elements that go into political parties, like, usually they would hire a musician to be able, or a singer to be able to provide entertainment and all the rest of it. But as you know, political rallies have been banned, and so we really have to just focus on other campaign activities and try and come up with proxy indicators to try and cost those. So those are the different elements that you are looking at when you look at campaign financing. It's about how much political parties are spending to try and convince the electorate, to try and convince you and me basically to vote for them. And I think that is information that citizens will be very keen to know. I mean, speaking as a citizen, I think I would be very interested in knowing how much Party X has been able to spend in terms of trying to get my vote or to convince me to put an X on their particular candidate.
Do you think political parties have the capacity to individually finance such kind of campaigns that are taking place at the moment?
Well, I mean, the fact that they are actually doing it shows that they do have the capacity.
Individually, like without external funding?
Well, it's a very difficult one to state categorical, and that is all the more reason why we're saying it's important for parties to be able to disclose the sources of their finances. I mean, obviously, most of the political parties, in terms of domestic, maybe resource mobilization, get their funding from membership fees or things of that nature. I think for those political parties that have members of parliament, I think they also mandate their members of parliament to make a certain contribution to their operations. But I mean, in terms of in terms of the broader picture or the broader element or maybe the wider elements of the campaign, probably there are very few political parties in Zambia. I'm not even sure if there is any that can, I think, that can actually be able to mount a campaign solely on the basis of domestic resource mobilization. I mean, the fact that even the ruling party, for example, had donor, and we don't know at this point whether it was an outside donor or a donor from Zambia, but it may not be too far-fetched to assume that it was an outside donor. Had the donor actually paying for their ministers, that goes to show you that on their own individually they may not have what it takes to be able to finance their operations, certainly in the context of a campaign. So I think it's very difficult to state with certainty whether they have the capacity individually to do it, but based on the different aspects that we have looked at so far, I think it would probably be fair to suggest that they probably do not have the capacity to do it on their own. And that is why it's important for us to regulate this even as a country.
What does lack of disclosure on sources of funding by political parties or candidates mean for transparency and accountability?
I mean, it really goes against the very ethos of transparency. It goes against the very ethos of accountability. It goes against the very ethos of openness, as well as political integrity in that sense. And so it also makes it very difficult for political parties to be held accountable for how they are spending their money or for their financial management. And you need to realize that for all these political parties that are competing for political power, you need to realize that the things that are happening at political party level are likely to be the things that are happening if these political parties, for example, form government or remain in government in the case of the ruling party. So what is happening in terms of the inner circles of the political parties will be reflected at the national level when these parties either get into government or continue in government. So it's very important for us to already begin to interrogate these issues at the level of political parties, because that is what is going to be extrapolated onto the national level. And I think if you begin to see elements of political parties not being open at the level of their internal operations, then it should really worry you in terms of what that may entail for the national level processes as well. And that's why it's important for us to interrogate these issues at the level of political parties.
Well, in case you are joining us, you can also participate on the program by dialing the number that is scrolling on your screens to participate. You can also get to participate via our social media platform on social media on our Facebook page, that is Kamni TV Zambia, by leaving a comment. Now, proceeding with the program, Mr. Nyambe, I also want to find out, does the same lack of disclosure could also qualify the aspect, would say, some business interests within and outside Zambia would be behind the financing of various political parties, probably for the sake of ensuring that they influence policy change or policy direction in their favor of their businesses?
Absolutely, Patrick, and I think that is the crust of the matter. And essentially what you've described is exactly what policy capture is. And so if you have the aspect of political financing or campaign financing not regulated or not having any eye on it, so to speak, it really opens you up to all sorts of possibilities, such as the ones that you have mentioned. We could have business interests from outside the country, or maybe organizations that are, I mean, I don't know, it's a bit extreme, but that may be pushing specific agenda, a terrorist agenda, for example, or whatever. What that entails is that if those organizations then provide funding to a particular political party, obviously they will expect something in return. And if this political party forms government or remains in government, then absolutely, at some point, these people will come and say, okay, look, guys, we funded you and we helped you get into power. So now, in terms of the investment policies or the investment climate, what we want is for you to push through such a policy or such a piece of legislation. So what that entails is that the policy framework as well as the legal framework stops responding to the felt needs of the Zambian citizens, but it starts responding to the needs and interests of the people that actually gave funding to that political party. So basically what you have described, Patrick, is exactly what we are hoping to address by making it mandatory for political parties to actually disclose their sources of funding, so that, again, citizens can begin to make judgments in terms of what philosophies and ideologies actually, these political parties are basing their operations on. So it is very important for that very reason that, the sources of funding for political parties actually gets disclosed, because, the consequences of state capture are actually real. I mean, we have seen examples from, within the region, most notably South Africa, when it comes to state capture. And so that is not a story I don't think that we would want to be told about Zambia. So I think we've got a very big job to play. As a country, we've got a very big job to do in terms of making sure that we do everything in our power to reduce as much as possible the risk of policy or state capture happening, even at the level of political parties. And that's why this conversation is an important one to have.
Thank you. Now, how does the lack of access to such information affect the role of CSOs as watchdogs in election monitoring especially?
Okay, the role of civil society organizations really does not change, okay? So it doesn't change whether information about political party financing is available or not. I mean, civil society still remain the watchdog, still remain with the watchdog role that they have, and they still remain with the role that they have to sort of highlight issues to do with transparency, accountability, and things of that nature. But I think what, that lack of access to such information does is that it makes it very difficult for civil society organizations to be effective in their advocacy interventions, particularly on the issue of, on the broader issue of political party financing. So it makes our work a bit more difficult, because obviously if political parties are not keen to disclose that information, then it means our work becomes a bit more difficult. And that is why for us we've been using these proxy measures that I've talked about earlier to try and cost, for example, the billboard advertisements and other campaign activities in a bid to provide this information to the public, because we believe that this is information that should be in the public domain, and this is information that the public can use to make judgments about the different political parties that are trying to sell themselves to them. So yes, the role of civil society doesn't change, but I think the absence of this information makes it a bit more challenging for us to be able to excel in our role.
But we need a legal framework that will compel political parties to disclose, publish financial statements and the likes.
Well, like I've said earlier on, there is already something that is provided for. Of course, the Constitution has said that some of these aspects will be prescribed, and this prescription is actually there in the political parties bill. It is not an act yet, because it is still being worked on, I suppose. But there is that provision that has been made. But I think for me, really, the key thing is that political parties, and this is a call that I'm making to all political parties in Zambia, is that they really should take more interest in the broader elements of the political parties bill. Because like I said earlier, it has some elements and provisions which are inimical to the interests of opposition political parties in particular, but also of the democratic aspirations that we have as a country. So political parties really should not just be excited about the fact that they will be funded by central government. I think that is just a small element of it. But there are other provisions within that bill that actually make it a very dangerous bill. I mean, it reminds me of the whole debate around the late Bill 10. I'll say the late Bill 10. Because yes, Bill 10 had some provisions, and I think that was what was being marketed, that it had some provisions that were good. But I think for the most part, most of what was in there was actually inimical to our governance processes as a country. So one of the things that we always say is that if I give you poison, Patrick, okay, I bring poison to you, and I say, okay, in this poison, I have put some sugar. Of course, sugar is good, but it is still poison. Yes, it has some sugar, but it is still poison, and it can still kill you. So the way I'm seeing this political parties bill is essentially the same principle that we saw with Bill 10, that yes, they have put in this element of funding of political parties to sort of sweeten everything up. But if you look at the broader elements and broader dimensions of that bill, then it's something really that should worry political parties. And my prayer is that political parties will interrogate this bill and begin to really interrogate it for what it is and see what is in there. Because most of what is in there, I can guarantee you that it is not going to fly in the eyes of many political parties, and they really should interrogate it a bit more.
What should be the best approach when looking at that law? Because we saw that, for example, in the case of Bill 10, the approach was not welcomed by many stakeholders like yourselves. But what approach do we take as a country to ensure that the bill is in acceptance with the majority of our citizens?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when it comes to, enacting legislation, the one element that always comes in is this whole element of consultation, of it being a consultative process. I think the nature of the issues that, proposed law actually touches on requires there to be some really, really good consensus and good consultation around it. And so part of really what needs to happen, first of all, is that there should be platforms and processes that are provided for this consultation actually to happen. But beyond that, I think for me, the biggest bone really that I have to chew is with political parties themselves. Because we have seen in the past where, even parliamentarians enacting pieces of legislation that ultimately actually come to haunt them themselves, because either they did not read or they just didn't really care to go into the detail of what was being proposed. And that is the danger that I'm seeing with this political parties bill. So there has to be that consensus and the platform provided for that consensus to happen, absolutely. But beyond that, the political parties themselves, because they are the key stakeholders when it comes to this particular proposed piece of legislation, the political parties themselves should take keen interest in scrutinizing this bill, picking it up and, scrutinizing it left, right, and center, just to make sure that it has all the elements that will actually promote and enhance our democratic aspirations rather than diminish them, as in our view, as the current bill proposes to do. So again, I emphasize, political parties, please do not just be excited about the fact that you will be funded. That is just a small carrot that is being dangled in front. But many other provisions and elements of the political parties bill, I don't think it is things that political parties will like. And so they need to take interest in terms of scrutinizing that.
Why should citizens take keen interest in who fund political campaigns?
Very important question, and I think we touched on it in our preamble. The fact that it is important for citizens to actually know, so that they can get a sense of who respective political parties are aligning themselves to, or who political parties are associating themselves with. The reason for that is because it can be a good pointer as to what the values, ideologies, and philosophies of those political parties are actually premised on. So it can be a very good proxy indication of what this party believes in and what the values are actually based on. But beyond that, the other reason is that it will actually serve as a demonstration of how transparent the political parties are, or a particular political party is. And again, this can be used as a proxy indication of how transparent these political parties will be when they form government or when they continue in government. So I think it's about just making sure that political parties are living up to their ideals even before they are in government, so that they are able to transfer those very ideals even when they do happen to form government. So that is why it's important for citizens to be able to know.
Our dear viewers, you are watching a program powered by the Alliance for Community Actions on Elections Watch. Now, we are discussing an interesting topic, which is financing of political campaigns. In case you want to participate in the program, you can call us and air out your concerns surrounding the topic of discussion. But just now, we're just going to take a second break, and we'll be back shortly with our topic of discussion. Thank you.
TV offers a wide range of advertising spaces for motion adverts, preaching programs, social media advertising, studio facilities, productions, programs, and documentaries. Grow your business with us at Camnet TV. For advertising space, visit our offices at plot number 396/100, Ibex Hill, Kablonga Road. Call 0962 965 883 or 0979 753 010, or you can email us on info@camnettvafrica.com. Camnet TV, no just another channel.
Zambia has embarked on an economic journey for individual financial emancipation, empowering its citizens through land acquisition and developing the nation through agriculture. This time, Zambians are coming together, taking it upon themselves with the help of government to develop this great nation by taking individual responsibility and ownership of this great nation. The economic revolution has started. There are thousands of Zambians with a can-do mindset who are resolute, unstoppable, full of confidence and conviction that Zambia's set time of favor for development is now. Don't be left out. This could be the time you have been waiting for. Camnet Television, in conjunction with the United Agrivision Consultancy Limited, will be hosting a national conference on becoming a millionaire through agriculture. Date 1st October and 2nd October 2021. Charges 750 kwacha per person per day, that includes lunch. A limited number of participants through Zoom have also been reserved. You can also be part of the conference from the comfort of your home by registering online via Zoom, joining the people who were born for greatness. Charges for participation via Zoom are only 300 kwacha per person. Time 0730 hours to 17 hours. Registration and confirmation of attendance will take place on the 29th of September 2021. Time 14 hours to 17 hours. Venue, the Healing Word Ministries International, the home of Camnet Television in Abex Hill, Kabalonga Road, Lusaka.
Welcome back. We are glad that you could be part of the program. You are watching an Election Watch TV series that is powered by the Alliance for Community Action, ACA. My guest on the program today is coming from the Transparency International Zambia, TIZ, and is Mr. MAURICE NYAMBE. We've been discussing the issue of financing of political campaigns. As you already know, Zambia will be holding elections on the 12th of August, where you citizens are expected to cast your vote based on which political party convinces you, depending on their manifesto. Now, this program is also a build-up to help you understand various issues surrounding the electoral process. Now, as we proceed with the program, Mr. Nyambe, I also want to get your perspective. In this election, should the issue of transparency and accountability be prioritized by these political parties as they go to canvass for votes to the electorates?
Absolutely, Patrick. I think that really goes without saying, the fact that political parties really should be transparent and open about their issues and their operations. But I think as the electorate as well, I think we've got a role to play. And so aspects of integrity, I think are aspects that really we should give more credence to. We have seen in the past, in past electoral processes, political party candidates coming to us with all forms of inducements and gifts and things of that nature. And for the most part, we have allowed that to happen. Our hope is that, this is not something that we will tolerate this time around, that, we'll be very strict with these candidates that are coming to try and to try and entice us with any inducements or gifts of that nature. Because essentially when a candidate is coming to you and they want to buy your vote, because they've given you a bottle of cooking or a pack of sugar or things like that, basically what they are saying is that, they're not really putting value on your vote, and they are saying that your vote can actually be bought just, with those, ordinary, everyday things that we see. And so I think as citizens and as the electorate, we need to put a firmer stance and to show these political parties that we will not allow them to actually take advantage of us in the way that it has happened in the past. Another element I need to bring out is that, you know, when a candidate comes to you and they buy your vote in that sense, effectively what that does is that it's almost like you've sold away your right to be able to question that candidate. You see what I mean? If I come to you, Patrick, and I buy something from you, you don't have any right to decide how I'm going to use what I've bought from you. And so if we allow ourselves to be influenced by politicians in that sense, effectively what we're doing is that we are selling our right to be able to question these candidates when they do get elected. What will give me the right then to go to my member of parliament and say, hey, can you, to demand accountability for something that he or she has or has not done. And so it is a bigger, this aspect of inducing the electorate has far bigger implications and consequences than we realize. And I think it's something that we really should speak out against, and it's something that we have continued to speak out against. Just one last element on that. One of the things that we have heard, we've heard politicians say, is that, you know, when these candidates come to you and they offer you all these gifts, you should accept those gifts. But then when you go in the booth, you know yourself who you are going to vote for. But for us, we don't think that that is even an approach that people should be taking, because effectively what that does is that it is further encouraging electoral corruption. So these people will actually continue coming because they don't know that whatever decision that you've made inside to say you are just getting their gifts, but then you're not going to be able to vote for them. For us, what we are saying is that we should not accept those inducements at all, as difficult as it is given, you know, the economic climate that we live in, particularly if you go into rural areas. But I think the onus also is on us as civil society organizations to actually get this message across, that we should not allow electoral corruption of any sort to happen, and we should not justify it in any way, shape or form. Interesting.
Now, in case you want to participate on the program, you can call by the number that is scrolling on your screens. We are discussing political financing. Now, a number of issues have been brought out by Mr. Nyambe. Interesting. They also did an analysis regarding just what goes into financing of campaigns, for instance, advertising and the issue of campaign billboards and paid for adverts. And it's quite a substantial amount of money. But if we are spending much on money, can't we do more in terms of development, Mr. Nyambe? Isn't it possible for us to do more in terms of developing the country and addressing issues such as poverty?
Yes, indeed, Patrick, and that is, I think that is, in many respects, the million-dollar question. I mean, my personal thinking is that, you know, Zambia is not a poor country. We are a very rich country. We are rich in terms of natural resources. We are rich in terms of human resources. We are rich in terms of so many elements. And I think if we had leaders, or you know, leaders in government or in charge of our affairs, basically, that actually had a heart for the people, and that actually had the heart to develop, you know, to develop this country. Leaders that are driven by the virtues and ideals of some of the founding fathers, and it is very appropriate that we are actually commemorating and celebrating the life of someone like Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, because Dr. Kaunda, I think, represents that generation of leaders, certainly in the initial period of the fight for independence, represented that generation of leaders that really espoused principles of service, really, to humanity. And I think this is what is lacking in terms of the leaders that we have today. If we had leaders like that now, I think this country would not be where it is, even in terms of development. I personally think that we have what it takes to be able to develop this country. If you look at some of the monies that has been lost, for example, to corruption, even just over the last 5 years, okay? The honeybee scandal and all these other corruption scandals that we've seen, huge sums of money that have been lost, monies that could have gone into, you know, developing the health sector, monies that could have gone into building schools and things of that nature. I think we have what it takes in terms of resources, both human, natural, as well as financial, to be able to develop this country if we were serious about it. But I think for me, it is the issue of lack of priorities, but also just that absence of you know, the desire to be able to serve the people rather than, you know, focus on your own narrow political interests. I mean, one of the things that I do recall about 1991, and I know that, you know, I was a very young person then, but I do recall that one of the things that we heard in the immediate aftermath of 1991 was how people were actually making fun of former President Kaunda and his UNIP ministers, that, you know, despite serving for 27 years, they came out of government with nothing, okay? And already that showed you the level of thinking that people have, that they expected these people to have been stealing, okay? But they came out with nothing out of 27 years of service. Now, imagine the situation now where we have people that go into government basically with nothing, and then 5 years down the line, we see people accumulate so much wealth within a short period of time. I'm sorry to give this example, but even just the aspect of, if you go back to for example, the asset declarations that were made between 2015 when President Lungu was coming into office and 2016 when there was another election. In 2015, I think he declared assets worth around 2.5 million or thereabout, if I'm not mistaken. 18 months later, in 2016, he declared assets worth around 23 million. And the question was, well, what has happened here? And so it is things like that. Now, I'm not saying or insinuating anything that maybe there's been stealing happening or things of that nature. Far from it. But what I am saying is that it sort of goes to show why it's important for us to be very cardinal, even when it comes to these specific elements. And that is why, just touching on another issue, we have been calling, and we have made some engagement with the Electoral Commission of Zambia that they should actually publicize the asset declarations of the presidential candidates for this particular election. Now, I know that the ECZ has come out and said there is no law that mandates them to disclose, but our counter argument is that there is also no law that says they should not or they can't. So there's also no law that stops them. So in the interest of accountability, in the interest of transparency and openness, why not just disclose? Because it will be interesting to see how much wealth accumulation has happened over this particular period. So yes, I think we have what it takes to be able to develop this country, but it's about lack of priorities or misplaced priorities, if you like, but also just the selfishness of many of our leaders that we have, that, you know, they go into politics with the idea of benefiting from it rather than serving the people in the real sense of the word. And I think that is the big tragedy that we have.
Do we need to set a limit on how much should be spent during political campaigns to level the playing field?
That is very interesting, and you will be interested to note that the Constitution of Zambia, actually, as amended in 2016, has actually provided for that. So Article 60, Part 60, 4D, actually says this will be prescribed, and it has been prescribed in the political parties bill. Okay, but now here's the interesting thing, and this is why I'm saying political parties really should take interest in the political parties bill. So the political parties bill states that the power, actually it gives the power to be able to make regulations that state the maximum amount that political parties should spend on a campaign. It places that power in the hands of the minister, okay? Obviously, it will be the Minister of Home Affairs. So it places that power in the hands of the Minister of Home Affairs. So the Minister of Home Affairs is the one who's going to say, okay, Party X, this is how much you can spend on campaigns. Now, do you see the danger with that? Because first of all, the minister himself or herself, not only is he or she a member of a political party, she or he is an interested party as well. And so the conflict of interest there is very clear, because that particular minister belongs to a political party. So if you are having the minister then deciding to say, okay, that political party should not spend more than this amount for campaigns, then I think those are problems that you are creating. And I think for us, that's why we are saying that political parties really should scrutinize this bill. I keep insisting that. And if there's one message that should be gotten from this program, is that we are making a passionate appeal to political parties to scrutinize the political parties bill. Because otherwise you will wake up one day and there will be a piece of legislation and a law that actually mandates the Minister of Home Affairs to be able to prescribe how much opposition political parties, for example, should spend on campaigns. And I think you can just imagine the sort of problems that you could have from that. So, yes, while in principle it may be a good idea to cap the spending so that you sort of create a level playing field of sorts, I think the how of implementing this will be difficult. How to implement it will be difficult. But like I said, if political parties do not wake up and actually scrutinize this bill, it will become law. And the Minister of Home Affairs will have the unilateral authority to be able to decide how much political parties should spend on campaigns. And I think that is something that we should really watch out for and be against in every sense of the word.
On the same issue, don't you think we have a caller just... you are through to Camnet TV. May we have your name and where you're calling us from? Hello, you are through to Camnet TV. Hello, you are through to Camnet TV. May we have your name? Where are you calling us from? You can proceed, sir.
Good evening, sir. I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but good evening. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm sorry your this program. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's a very interesting topic. But what I want to say, maybe want to ask from you, Mr. Nyambe, what you do to the political party, if you see that, okay, this political party, this is when they are starting, like maybe this is when they are maintaining like this political party. Then later on, when they just form the government, you find that they accumulate a lot of wealth. Does this mean that in our country we don't have a law which makes us people to follow that person with the connector to let it down to how much wealth does this person has before he joins the political party? I mean, this political thing. So, we would love to know, like you as a citizen, because these people, some of them, they just go there like this case to save our lives. But they just go there to accumulate wealth from us poor people again. So please, it's better you advise so that the people know came up before that person becomes the president. We should know how old he is or how old she is. You know, that's my interest as of now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comment, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Nyambe, you can take up with, in fact, it's just agreeing with what you were just saying. You can respond to what he's bringing on the table.
Yes, indeed. I think he's asking about, you know, whether there's any law that actually mandates these people to actually disclose when they come into power and when they don't. I think there are a number of sides to this particular issue. And the first is that currently there is a requirement actually for cabinet ministers and I think members of parliament to be able to make these annual declarations of their wealth. But I think in terms of how this has been implemented, I mean, that is something that really has not worked very well. And I think part of the reason for this is that there does not seem to be any punitive measures that have been prescribed for when one fails to make a declaration, then what happens. And I think we have heard in the past that only very few of the previous cabinet ministers, for example, were actually doing this religiously. I think if I recall correctly, one of the people that was said to have been very good at doing this was Honorable Given Luwinda. I don't know, I may have gotten my facts wrong, but I think that was what we have heard. But also, at the time of nomination, for example, of the presidential candidates, that is one of the requirements, that presidential candidates are actually supposed to make those declarations. And that is why I said earlier that we are engaging actually with the ECZ so that we can have access to the declarations that have been made for this particular election. Because yes, they've said no law says they should, but no law says they should not. So why not just do it? I think it's an important element for citizens to be able to know, so that we are able to see, you know, the extrapolation of wealth that is happening, even in terms of our politicians and our political parties. I think the aspect of people getting into politics just for the sole purpose of enriching themselves is something that we have seen throughout much of our politics. And when we begin to strengthen this aspect of them making declarations, I think then we'll be on that would be the road to actually us starting to address this particular element. Because maybe if I get into politics with that particular goal, I will sort of be discouraged because I will know that, okay, I made a declaration that says I've got 200 kwacha in my account. So 2 years down the line, if my declaration shows that now I have 10 million, and if you look at my income, sources of income and things like that, it doesn't really warrant that huge jump in terms of my account, then you begin to actually address those as specific things. So yes, just to agree with him that it is important for us to strengthen that side of things, because it will help in terms of sort of trying to put a watch on these people that are going into all these positions to serve us, and just to ensure that they are going in for the purposes of actually saving the country rather than enriching themselves, which appears to be the biggest issue.
Should the FIC, or does the FIC has a role to play in this this aspect of transparency, especially on the part of political parties, to be specific, or do we need to start working around that so that the FIC can equally take an interest in that agenda?
Well, the FIC obviously has a very important role to play in terms of aspects of good public financial management, but also just aspects of money laundering, as well as money related to corruption. And I think over the years we have seen the FIC really playing that role quite well, despite the big challenges that that they have in that respect, and despite the pressures that have come from largely from politicians, I have to say. So yes, the FIC has got an important role to play, and I think if you look at some of the trends analysis reports that they have released, they will actually mention what are called the PEPs, or politically exposed persons, and how these politically exposed persons are involved in all manner of wrongdoing when it comes to issues of public finance management. So yes, the FIC, I think, has got an important role to play, but the role that they have really is prescribed, because the FIC is a creation of the supreme law of the land, and so it is prescribed in terms of what they should focus on. But I think beyond that, maybe just to extend this a bit, I think entities such as the Anti-Corruption Commission, for example, should also get on board in terms of taking keen interest in some of these.
Can I don't you thought we have a caller? Hello, you are through to Camnet TV. Hello, you are through to Camnet TV. Hello, we can't get you.
Yes. I just want to...
You are kindly share with us your names and where you are calling us from.
So I didn't get that.
We didn't get you. We didn't get the name. We didn't get the name. Sorry.
Munanyang.
Okay, you can go ahead with your contribution, sir.
Yes. I just want to... there is a problem here at Zambia. People, when they are too power, they are not to help ourselves. So we wait, we grant one that you are out of power, not only people being arrested in Athens. So I wait. Let the people are punished, once they are still in power, rather than to wait in the power.
Thank you for your contribution. Thank you. Well, his point is that why does Zambia has to wait to take action against the serving leaders when they're out of power? Why don't we act when people are actually serving their term?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Mr. Mnanyanga really has hit the nail on the head, and this is a trend that we have seen in the past.
But is it a good one?
Of course, it's not a good one, because I mean, you want to be. What that shows is basically, to me, it shows the lack of a political will, even when it comes to the fight against corruption. That you want to wait until a particular person maybe has gone into wrong books with you, or a particular person is no longer part of your government, maybe because for some reason maybe you are, I don't know, maybe you are benefiting from that person being part of your fold in that sense. But I think it's something that we need to change as a country. one of the things that I remember, like a few years ago, I think it was in 2016, I remember President Lungu actually went on record to say that, you know, some of his ministers were corrupt and that he was going to take action against some of them. And I think it was a few weeks down the line, we saw one of the ministers actually being dismissed. I think it was Honorable Chimba Kambwili then. The interesting thing is that, of course, you know what has happened now. Mr. Kambwili is back in the fold. So it causes you to have questions and say, okay, but so what does that mean? Does it mean that, you know, the issues for which he was dismissed have now been dealt with? Is he no longer, you know, associated with those elements that he was associated with? So it's things like that. And for us, that shows really a lack of political will to deal with the issue of corruption. The fact that, you know, you want to almost like shield these people because they are within your fold. But then when they cross your line and, you know, they are no longer part of your fold, that's when you go at them with guns blazing. I think that's not something that we should tolerate. I mean, we need to be able to fight corruption whenever and wherever it happens if we are to make any real progress. We cannot be selective in our approach because, I mean, we actually need to be able to make progress in the fight against corruption. And unfortunately, we have not done so well as a country when it comes to this particular fight. So I agree with Mr. Mnanyanga that we need to strengthen our ability to be able to deal with issues of corruption, particularly when it involves the so-called politically exposed persons, even when they are still serving, because I think it would send a very big statement and a very big signal to the effect that, you know, we are not going to tolerate corruption in any way, shape, or form. But unfortunately, based on what we have seen, that is not something that we can say right now.
We know that the two leading political parties in the country, be the Patriotic Front and the Opposition United Party for National Development, both their party manifestos are stating on how they want to combat corruption. The UPND are claiming zero tolerance to corruption. The PF is also reaffirming its corruption fights, and also highlighted the aspect of integrity committees. But I know integrity committees have been there. So, but do we have hope under the two that based on their commitment, they may be uphold transparency and accountability and actually take interest in the issues we are discussing of political party financing, especially for campaigns?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, the one thing that political parties will always do is that they will make all sorts of promises when it comes to their campaigns. And as Tia said, actually, we have done an analysis of some of the political party manifestos. We have analyzed 3 so far. So that's for the PF, the UPND, as well as the Socialist Party. And our focus really was specifically on what they have said on issues of corruption. Okay, and so yes, all three manifestos have said all the right things in terms of what they would do. Okay, but I mean, if you look at, let me start with the PF. I think that the problem that the PF has is that you know, they have the record of the last 10 years staring them in the face. So yes, they can make all the different, you know, the commitments that they have, and they have made commitments and promises in their manifesto about how they will address the corruption issue. But the point is that they have been in power for the last 10 years. What have they done about the fight against corruption? So our point is that before they can even begin to make new promises to the Zambian people, they need to be able to give an account of what they have done in the last 10 years with respect to the fight against corruption. I mean, if you look at TI's Corruption Perception Index, we have been declining in each of the last 5 years. We have been declining. And this is a period that the PF has been in power. So obviously something has gone wrong somewhere. So before you come and begin to make new promises to me, you need to tell me how much you have done or how you have fared with the earlier promises that you have made. So that is the big problem that the PF have. The UPND, on the other hand, and maybe even other opposition parties, they have the opposite problem. And the problem is that they do not have any record. Now, depending on how you look at it, that can be a plus or a minus. But the way we see it and the way we analyze their manifestos is that the fact that they don't have this track record actually should have given them even a greater impetus to be more specific and clear about what they would do, But going beyond that about how they would do what they're proposing to do, it's all well and good saying, you know, we're going to put in place fast-track courts and we're going to strengthen the Anti-Corruption Commission and other law enforcement agencies. But the question is, how exactly are you going to do that? And what we have seen with the opposition party manifestos is that they do not go into that level of detail to actually convince the masses in terms of the how aspect of it. So the what is very well covered and very adequately covered, but the how aspect of it is, I think, what could have been strengthened a bit more. So yes, political parties have made these promises, but like we always say, ultimately to be up to the citizens and the electorate to be able to decide. Like we said, for the PF, they have the last 10 years staring at them, because that is a track record that they cannot run away from, because it is their record, seeing as they have been in power for the last 10 years. But for the opposition political parties, their role really is to convince the masses that, you know, this piece of the moon that we are promising you will actually be able to deliver it to you. So, I mean, the battle lines have been drawn in a sense, and I think it will be up to the electorate to make that particular judgment.
Mr. Nyambe, as we come towards the end of the program, what is the take-home on the issue of financing of political campaigns?
Thank you so much. I think the take-home, well, a number of points that I would want to emphasize. The fact that you know, it is important for this electoral process, particularly in relation to the 12th August elections. It is important for this electoral process really to espouse principles of integrity, principles of transparency, and principles of openness, so that we can actually assure ourselves that we are doing the correct thing. And one way to do that would be actually for political parties to become more open about you know, their operations. And part of their becoming open will actually entail them even revealing the source of their campaign financing, because it will help to build that trust. And as political parties, I think it is important for you to be able to build trust with the citizens and with your potential electorates. So the aspect of building trust is something that should be enhanced, and it will come when political parties are very open about their sources of funding. Beyond that, the other takeaway really is, again, my plea to the political parties, like, please scrutinize the political parties bill, because it has provisions and elements in there that will make your lives very difficult as opposition political parties if it does get enacted into law in its current form. So take interest in it and scrutinize it, because it will be for your own good and for your own benefit. Lastly, just to call on all the different political stakeholders that even as we are engaged in this campaign leading up to 12th August, I think we should do our campaigns with civility and with really promoting aspects of unity and the things that really bring us together. I think we have seen in the past, you know, our election season characterized by things like, you know, political mudslinging, things like violence, tribalism, and things of that nature. Our hope is that this particular electoral cycle and electoral process will actually be characterized by, you know, a very healthy contestation of ideas for how we can improve the well-being and welfare of this country. For once, let's not talk about tribe. Let's not talk about, you know, how this person. Let's not mudsling people, but let's really talk about the issues that we are going to do, the issues that actually bring us together as Zambians. And I think it's important for us to send that message across.
Mr. Nyambe, thank you for finding time to be part of the program.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Well, our dear viewers, we have come towards the end of our program. We are glad that you could find time to be part of the program wherever you may have been watching us from. The program is powered by the Alliance for Community Action under the Elections Watch TV series on Camry TV. Well, ours is a platform to ensure that you, the citizens, are informed, especially on issues pertaining to governance and elections. As you already know, the country will be going to the polls on August 12th to elect leaders at parliamentary, local government, as well as presidential levels. Your host have been Patrick Soko. Until next time, as we come with another episode of The Verdict, stay tuned.